Hi guys, this is Mike, and today we're going to talk about how low you can tune your Gibson scale guitar, what you have to think about when you do so, or if you should just surrender and buy a baritone. I know you want to. All of that after this. With two eyes. Okay, so the Gibson scale, 24.75 inches, used on most Gibsons, Epiphones, ESPs, LTDs, most guitars really that resemble a Les Paul even in the slightest. Because of the short scale and physics, there will be boundaries to how low you can tune such an instrument, but there doesn't seem to be a consensus on the internet how low that actually is. I've been researching this topic for several weeks now, and there are so many different opinions on this. There are people out there that say that even for something like drop C, you should buy a baritone. There are folks that play drop A on Gibson scale guitars. There are some that use 9-46 strings for drop tunings, and others are using strings as thick as spaghetti. True hardcore Italian metal. Metal! Yeah! This video, however, will be my findings, what I found out in the last couple of weeks when messing around with different guitars and different tunings. So let's actually start with the tunings, and let's start with the tuning that we all tried out first, just when we started to play the guitar, drop D. It's basically standard tuning where you just take your low E and drop it down to D. Easy enough, right? So is it possible on a Gibson scale guitar? Of course it is. Do you have to adjust something or do a special setup in your guitar? No, almost never. Except of course there were problems in the first place. But other than that, this is standard practice, and every guitar really should allow you to do drop D without any hassle. Another popular tuning is drop C sharp. That's basically drop D, but you take every string and down tune it half a step. I tried that on my Gibson Les Paul Standard, which still has the factory strings, which is a set of 9-46. So let's see how that sounds. Okay, so as you might hear, I had absolutely no problems going to drop C sharp, even with these light strings. They are a little bit flabby, however, so if I were to keep this guitar in this tuning, I would go for a string gauge of 10-48 or something. And then I think I would have to make a quick adjustment of the neck tension and maybe even the bridge height because of the new string gauge. But let's go even deeper down the rabbit hole. Drop C, the preferred tuning of a lot of metal bands. Is it possible on a Gibson scale guitar? Yes, although now thicker strings are definitely recommended. So as soon as you drop to, well, drop C, your standard set of niners will definitely be too flabby. That's why I started to experiment with different string gauges, and for this guitar and this tuning, something like 12-54 or even 12-56 definitely do the job. 12-54, which I have here now on this guitar, almost feel like a set of niners in standard tuning, so they are light but not too flabby. However, with great tension come great problems. Because there will be considerably more tension from the strings, right? Your neck will start to bow basically, and you have to compensate for that by adjusting the neck tension. And because the strings are thicker and they need more space to move, to oscillate, right? You will get terrible fret buzz, unless, of course, you adjust the string height by adjusting the bridge height. And now I guess you realize why baritone guitars are so popular these days. So if you allow me to humble brag, I am pretty good at setting up my own guitars and working on the intonation and all that. But even with this great skill set of mine, I do have pretty high string action here. So we're speaking about, like, of course it starts gradually, but you can notice it definitely starting at the 5th fret or something. To give you an idea, let's measure on the 12th fret, from the fretboard to the bottom border of the E string. Here I have a distance of approximately 4 millimeters, which is totally playable, but a little bit higher than I would like it to be. The good news is that with this setup I have absolutely no fret noise whatsoever. So I don't know if you do mind fret noise or not. Some people claim, some people say that a little bit of fret noise is totally normal and to be expected. I don't really like it, and so I try to avoid it at all costs. I think if you wouldn't mind a little bit of fret noise, you could go down maybe like 1 millimeter here, which still would leave us at 3 millimeters, which is pretty high for something that's supposed to be a metal guitar, right? So to make it short, drop C on a 24 3/4 inch guitar possible? Yes. The strings I used here was a set of 12 to 54, and you definitely have to work on your neck tension, on your intonation, and the bridge or string height. And by the way, about the string gauges, I'm just telling you them so you have a starting point, right? That's not like a golden rule or something. As I said, people are using all different kinds of string gauges for these tunings. Some guy on Gearspace swore on 58s or even 60s for his drop C tuning. So to each his own really, whatever works for you. Right, so let's do the same thing for drop B. Is drop B possible? Yes. And basically everything that I said about drop C is true here as well. So for drop B, I would suggest going with something like 12 to 56 or even stronger. And although we are only half a step lower than drop C, the string action rises again. On my Epiphone here on the 12th fret, I have 4.5, 4.6 millimeters, and that's the best that I could do without any fret noise. Again, if you don't mind a little bit of fret noise, I guess maybe we could drop down maybe 1 millimeter more. But generally speaking, with strings as thick as these, I really think we're starting to push the boundaries. Okay, so drop A. Drop A is interesting because this is the standard tuning for most baritone guitars. Almost every 6-string baritone guitar you will find is either set up to standard A or drop A. And all of them, or most of them, will be shipping with a set of 13 to 63. So I researched and listened to some folks on Gearspace, and I actually bought this set of 13 to 62 strings. And I tried to install them on my LTD EC-1000 there, but surprise, surprise, the nut slots are too narrow, which means that I would have to file them, which also means that I'm not going to do that for now. Because you know what they say, once you go wide, your standard tuning ain't alright. No, but you know what I mean, right? So I don't want to file my guitar, not just for a YouTube video, but what I did was going down with this guitar, with my Epiphone Les Paul Studio, and let's check out how that sounds. So as you might hear, we do have fret noise and we do have slight intonation issues. But to be completely honest, I think that even if I were to file the nut, and even if I were to install these spaghetti strings, and even if I would be able to set up the intonation correctly, we still would be so high up, you know, action-wise, that this guitar would be just not fun to play. You know, and that's why ultimately there are guitars out there that have a longer scale than the standard 24 3/4 inch Gibson scale. Most Fender Teles, as far as I know, have a 25.5 scale. Remember Jim Root from Slipknot plays a Fender Tele. But also most Schecters, Ibanez, Kramers are starting at 25.5. And we're not even talking about baritones that start at 27 inches. So my conclusion is that everything up until drop B is definitely doable on a standard Gibson scale guitar, but everything below that will be too much of a compromise in my opinion. The playability will suffer because of the high string action, and correct intonation will also be very hard to accomplish. Which does not mean, by the way, that you have to go out and buy a baritone right now, but I'm just saying that every inch, every additional inch will definitely help. On the other side, one guy on Gearspace wrote that he plays drop G on 10 to 52, so what do I know? And speaking of knowing, that's basically everything that I know, you do know now, and that's basically the end of the video. Guys, do you have any experience with Gibson scale guitars and down tuning? What is your general opinion on baritone guitars? Are they cool or a fad? Leave your comment below, subscribe if you haven't already. Have a good one, and I'll see you next time. Bye.